Okay, I think we'll kick things off now. Hello and welcome to this webinar about the COVID-19 Audience Outlook Monitor. This is the third in our weekly series, and today's topic is online engagement with hosts Keir Winesmith, a consultant and academic working at the intersection of digital and culture, and Tandi Palmer Williams, managing director of Patternmakers, the agency that has delivered this research tool. I'm Chris Pope, Research Programme Manager at the Australia Council for the Arts, and the Council is very happy to be running this webinar today, and a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us this morning. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from which I'm coming to you today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd also like to acknowledge the many nations throughout Australia that we're gathering from, and pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and to all First Nations peoples present and online in this session. As we know, arts and cultural communities across the country and around the world have been devastated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Necessary restrictions on public gathering and travel have resulted in the closure of cultural venues and the cancellation or postponement of events and programmes. However, many artists and arts organisations have pivoted to digital content to reach and attract audiences, be it streaming live performances, creating virtual galleries, or delivering online classes and tutorials. As restrictions start to ease and some institutions reopen, many people are now needing to make critical decisions and plan for the future in both the physical and digital space. We know that all decisions carry a high degree of risk. We've never been here before, certainly not on this scale. So this research is providing vital information, not only on when audiences will be ready to return to public spaces and under what circumstances, but also on how audiences are finding new ways to engage with arts and creativity online, including their motivations and barriers and the markets for digital work. This will be hugely important as everyone navigates the coming months, and the Council was very keen to support pattern makers in delivering this important research tool, as were many of our state funding agency colleagues. So I'll hand over to Keir now to kick off today's discussion and share his knowledge and experience in the use of digital to connect people to culture and place. Before I do, a quick note on registering questions. Please feel free to start sending those through, and if you could please use the Q&A button to do that. The chat function is also there for general discussion throughout, and we encourage you to use that, but we'll be taking questions at the end from the Q&A section. And now it's over to you, Keir. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, and hi, everyone. These are strange times. You can't see each other, but trust me, there's 120, 140 other people listening with you. I'm coming from the edge of Gadigal lands where they meet Wongal lands, and this the 250th year since Wongal and Gweagal lands were the beginnings of colonization started. This is a kind of auspicious year to think about what place we're on and whose place it is and who's looked after it and how we're going to hopefully work together, look after it into the future, something to keep in mind. I'm a sort of, I guess, a veteran of museum and technology, culture and technology, place and technology. And so I wanted to cover a couple of things that I think are emblematic of the actions that people are making rather than necessarily the ways that they're describing. Oh, I need to share my screen. So I think whoever's sharing now needs to stop so I can share too. Thanks very much. So the reason I want to talk is to lean on some expertise that has come from an event that both myself and Dr. Lizzie Muller from UNSW have been running for a year plus. You can see her on the left of screen of that image. It's called the Data Salon, Cultural Data Salon. We've been running it for since the beginning of 2019, so kind of a year before COVID started, and it's a bi-monthly meetup of cultural data interested professionals working in and around Sydney, in particular within the Sydney Culture Network, and has led us to understand and interrogate lots of the kind of particular facets of creating cultural work, place-based work, but also online work for cultural audiences across the city, talking and thinking about how people use place and how people use space. We've done a lot of deep dives on the experiences and expectations of our audiences and thought really broadly about what cultural data means and how that can inform our decision making. I also wrote a book about the digital future museums that came out a few weeks ago with Dr. Suze Anderson from George Washington University. So I'm kind of leaning on some of that thinking. And in particular, like the data-thon, trying to ground it in the Australian context. At our last session, we heard from a couple of people from the Archaeo of New South Wales who reflected on their experiences running Together in Art, which was a sort of pop-up project and experience that happened and continues to happen, but happened primarily during COVID-19, in particular during the lockdown, now that institutions like Archaeo of New South Wales have reopened to visitors. What's interesting about this and what's kind of emblematic of a lot of the organizations that I've spoken to over the last few months is that the actual visitation to people's online offering has been reduced, because the vast majority of people who are using kind of cultural websites for cultural institutions is to plan a visit, to plan their attendance. And so the total numbers are actually coming down, but the usage has absolutely changed. In some cases, you might be seeing a 20% or 30% drop of online participation globally. And then when you look at the really focused areas of, say, public programs online, or the way that people are presenting materials on, say, YouTube, or the way they're generating standalone projects like Together in Art, you can see a 2 or 3 or 4 or 500% increase in terms of the access and use. And also you might see fewer total numbers, but much higher total time on site, because people who are coming for dedicated reasons. This is not just the really big institutions like Archaeo of New South Wales, which did this project in partnership with organizations like the ABC and plenty of others, so they had kind of resources to be able to swing to. And the kind of valuable thing that I think we can all learn from this is that the Archaeo took staff who would otherwise be working in person on the floor, or they'd be working in research, and brought them and made them personalities you could engage with in sort of bite-sized ways. That was really effective, certainly for me with children at home that I was teaching. Another great example, Kusula Powerhouse in Western Sydney, who another presenter at the Data-thon recently talked about their Kusula Goes Digital, or Kusula House Goes Digital. And I think the strength of this program was that because it happened over the school holidays when they would normally be running literally hundreds of programs, they brought their public program staff into the studio. They brought their tech staff who would normally be setting up the tech for events, and turned those tech staff into kind of film production staff. They turned their theatre into a film set, and then produced and syndicated content online for audiences that can't themselves visit in person. So provided those sort of resources and almost made stars out of some of their frontline and public program staff who otherwise in many other institutions would be furloughed. What's interesting to me about this is there was a massive move to online offerings. So this is, I'm also on the board of a Museum Technology Professional Development Association called the MCN, Museum Computer Network. And we generated the ultimate guide to virtual museum resources, e-learning and online collections, which is ultimate. I mean, like that's the list. That's a list of things that you can go and check out online in the US at the moment. And what was kind of incredible about this is this particular website that sort of supports this professional organization has on average about 100,000 people visit it a year. This one webpage had 250,000 people visit it in 2 weeks. So the appetite, the interest in trying to create connections between people at home, their families, and these cultural institutions they're invested in is massive. What's sort of interesting, so this is just looking at Google Trends, so going global here, worldwide, this is just people typing in museum virtual tour into a Google search bar somewhere in the world. And you can see this just starts from 2019 into 2020, and it's sort of bubbling on at a few. And so this is not a total count, it's sort of a percentile interest over time. And it absolutely tops out as the lockdowns hit in the beginning of 2020. It goes to the top. And it's dropped away since then, but I think it's interesting is that it hasn't dropped to zero. Even if we look in Australia, this is just the Australian Google Trends from the beginning of the year to now, so just from the 1st of January to now. And you can see it tops out as we close, and then we're starting to reopen. But interestingly, it hasn't still gone to zero, and there's still this appetite to virtually attend museum experiences. And what I think is really powerful about that is that people want to have connected experiences, but I think what we're doing poorly as a sector is actually providing those rich, nuanced experiences that are somewhat sympathetic or experientially consistent with what people are actually looking for. So we're seeing people come looking, not sure what they're going to get, but they're not getting museum-like experience. They're getting a virtual facsimile of the real. And in most sort of born digital experiences, if they are a virtual facsimile of the real, they are poor, or they're not complete, or they're not compelling to the same degree. And I'm going to use an example from the UK because, to be honest, there isn't enough great examples from Australia. Perhaps the Kusula's example of taking the on-site experience and then virtualizing it through Q&A live and then the sort of canned experience afterwards is a good example, but it's not born of the internet. Cultural institutions who create content for the internet, born of the internet, that take affordances of the web as a medium, are always going to be more successful than those who say, we have this in-person thing and we're going to put it online. And I'll talk to that a little bit later in the Q&A, but I want to sort of pose that as a provocation to us as a sector right now. Interestingly, there's and as I'm going, Bianca's posting these links, so you don't need to try and write this down. All the links for all the things that I'm mentioning are either already available if you're following the comments, or will be available at the end. Chris Unit, who has a job similar to mine working in the UK, has been visualizing arts analytics for the last almost 10 years. And so he did this project of visualizing the National Theatre at home. So he took this big stand-up event, so you can kind of see quite a famous, another Chris up on stage there. So big tentpole event, lots of people talking about it in advance, streaming online through YouTube where you could donate and support. So we looked at the sort of numbers, and this is the numbers of people who are online at any moment during this big, well-publicized event in the UK. And so they're actually up over 200,000, which is a huge number. This is the amount of donations that people gave, and it got up to $40,000 over the course of this one event. And then this is the number of comments that were made through the time. And what's sort of interesting is that people go like, wow, they got $40,000 worth of donations from one event. Isn't this great? Maybe this is how we do content online during the pandemic when no one can physically visit a theatre. But I really hazard taking too much from this numerically, because this was a huge production to get it up online. It was $40,000, which is less than it cost to actually do. And it was a one-off event. It wasn't 5 nights a week or 3 nights a week or 20 nights, a month. It was just a one-off event. It was also less than they would have otherwise made if they simply had streamed it into movie theatres like they often did with the National Theatre when it was on stage in London. So it looks good, but it's actually hiding the amount of money and effort that it takes to get an event like this, the quality that you need to attract an audience that's going to give money, and you're still going to lose on it. So it's still a kind of, not even a zero-sum game, it's a losing game. So there's some big questions about our sudden pivot to providing free content, and whether that is, similar in some ways to newspapers giving away free content for a number of years and then realizing that they actually have to monetize the news in order to stay afloat. There's some big questions for us as the sector as we think about what our new normals are. What I am really excited about is some of the things that are starting to come up at the moment, like this example from Creation Theatre in the UK again. So like the opposite to the National Theatre, a tiny little theatre doing something really experimental, a play based on the Time Machine that's all available via Zoom. So you buy a ticket, you turn up, it's limited capacity, if you will, and they're actually using the affordances of Zoom, like the replacement backgrounds, kind of mise-en-scène, theatre within a theatre, and doing a performance that's actually designed to be consumed through a screen-mediated media, and like incredibly successful in terms of like, audience feedback and the quality of the offer. And so I think there's going to be more of us creating material that belongs online, that lives online, and is going to be, the opposite of a simple digital facsimile of the real. So I want to pause there. There's a set of provocations about how people are sort of numerically making actions and how they're kind of like what the numbers are telling us about the behaviors, because I want to counter that in our discussion with Tandi against what people say they're going to do through the Audience Outlook Monitor, which is more of a kind of projective set of data and analytics. And to get us from kind of A to B, we've prepared a couple of questions for you who are on the line, who are listening in. And I wonder if you could bring up one of those polls now, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So the first one is, to what degree has your organization expanded your online content production during this pandemic? So thinking about the times from closure to when we started to reopen, not this immediate moment. what we've seen, different organizations have taken a different approach. Most, and I'm not going to say what most is, there's sort of three ways that people have approached this, and I'm curious about the people in the audience and their experiences. They've taken existing staff who already work on online content and production and simply applied them to doing things that are very, very much focused around this at-home audience. There's institutions who've taken staff who would otherwise be doing something totally different, who'll be like not involved in online content production, not involved in digital content production at all. They might be frontline staff, they might be educators who aren't working in that space, they might be curators, security guards in some cases, pulling them into producing content for online, and others who have made no changes at all. They're simply business as usual, we're just not open. So it'd be great if you could fill that poll out. And then the next one says hosts and panelists can't vote. So I'll wait for the voting option to come up for me. And so the next poll, I still see poll number 1.
I'm seeing the next poll,
oh, cool.
Keir.
Tandi, if you can start, that'd be great. Yeah, great. I'm seeing it too. Which is, if you have expanded your online content, how long do you plan to do this in the future? And so are you looking to continue this level? Are you continue just for another month as we do this transition? You're looking a little bit further than that, or you want to you created a new normal that you'd like to see way out into the future, indefinitely, let's say. And so if people could, again, can't do this poll, but I have some very strong opinions about it. And then I think I'd love to hand back to you, Tandi, if you want to drive from here, that'd be fantastic.
All right. Did you want to show the results now or later?
I'd love to show the results now. I don't have access to that. So the incredible people working behind the scenes, is there a way to bring that up?
All right. And if those questions didn't suit you, I saw a comment from Linda, thanks for that. Feel free to put a comment in the chat that explains your situation.
Interesting. So almost 50% of people, yeah. So I think you can see what I can see, so I don't necessarily need to narrate it, but that has matched what we've seen in the data salon, although I guess in the data salon we've seen almost no one who's made no change at all, because we're, I guess, attracting institutions who are more proactive in this space.
Okay. Thanks. Interesting.
Well, this is really, to me, as a kind of as a digital practitioner working in the cultural sector and supporting and partnering with cultural institutions, to see almost 40% of people in their institutions that they're referring to want to continue this for the foreseeable future, I think is really fantastic. It's emblematic of a change to a new normal that I think our audiences are really looking for from us. Very exciting. Over to you, Tandi.
Thanks, Keir. Morning, everyone. Hope you had a nice weekend. It's lovely to see you again for this discussion about the Audience Outlook Monitor and what it tells us about online engagement by audiences during this time. And I'm really excited to be bringing together Keir's knowledge of what organisations are doing and seeing in their analytics, and then what we are learning from survey data, which sometimes can illuminate the why of what people are doing and what's behind some of their behaviours or what they might do differently in future. So I'd like to first add my acknowledgement of the traditional owners. As Keir said, it is a particularly important time for us to be thinking about the land that we're on and all the learning that we need to do in this space still. It's a real privilege to be connecting with you from Guringai country in Sydney. And today I see this is kind of a great follow-on to a webinar I did a few weeks ago with the Australia Council on what audiences want online, which is a bit of a an interesting name for a session, but a few weeks ago talking all about kind of online engagement and what drives reach, engagement and impact. So today we've got a whole new set of data from the Audience Outlook Monitor, which many of you would know is a cross-sector collaborative data collection exercise involving 159 arts and cultural organisations across the country of all different kinds. And we had 23,000 audience members respond to our first phase of data collection. And so those people are past attendees of arts and cultural organisations, performing arts, museums and galleries, literature organisations, festivals. And so what we've done is combine all of that data into a dashboard, which is freely available to you. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the session. But really by combining a breadth of data from many different organisations into the one dashboard, we can start to see trends and patterns that we wouldn't necessarily observe in a single database survey. And it gives us that richness of information that we can all draw on and talk about. So today we're going to be going into the online results from the Audience Outlook Monitor. I'm going to share my screen with you now. And I'll ask a colleague just to let me know if at any point Bianca, will you let me know if I have any internet problems at any point? Thank you. So you should now see some slides up on screen, and we're going to jump straight into the data now. So basically we asked past attendees to what are they participating in arts and culture online, and we listed out a number of different ways that they might be doing that. And what we heard back is that 75% of people are engaging in one way or another with arts and cultural experiences online. As I'm showing on screen, the most common way people are doing that is by watching video of pre-recorded performances or events. It's also really common to be watching live streamed performances or events. And then things like doing an online class or tutorial, seeing a virtual exhibition or a museum or gallery tour, creating content themselves as well. And then around a quarter of people aren't doing any of those things. That's what we heard. So in terms of who is doing what, we're going to talk about age in a moment, but I will also point out that a really strong factor that we discovered in the data as really important to how people are behaving online and offline is how engaged they are with arts and culture and the role of it in their lives. So their value system around arts and culture is one of the really most important factors in determining how someone interacts with our events and online offerings. And so it's online participation has been particularly high among people who are frequent attendees of arts and culture events in the past. So people who attend the performing arts more, weekly or more, or visit a gallery, compared to those who do it less often. Over a third, so 37% of people say they're engaging in online arts and culture more often than they did before the pandemic. And about 2/3 of those say that they plan to continue post-pandemic, which is kind of an interesting indicator for us to think about in relation to what we've sort of just talked about in terms of the horizon for our digital planning and to what extent these behaviours, this appetite to engage online is going to last throughout the rest of the pandemic and beyond. And what we're kind of learning is that to an extent, yes, it will. So for those who are planning for the long term, I think that's wise. So one of the things I will note around people's plans to continue is one of the things we've observed, that very frequent attendees of performing arts events and physical live experiences, they've been most they've been highly likely to jump on board with online participation, and they're more likely to say that they're doing this more frequently. But when we ask them, will they continue, they're slightly less likely to say they plan to continue, which suggests that frequent attendees are kind of eager to resume their usual patterns of attending physical events again. So whilst we've seen this swing to online, some of that, as events start to reopen, is going to return to the physical experience, while there are some segments who've actually discovered that they prefer participating online, or for access reasons, they're going to be continuing to look at participating online and want that to be an option for them in the future going forward. So I'll talk a little bit about age now, because it is in relation to online participation. There are some interesting age trends. So people of all ages are participating online. I will talk you through, though, some of the ways that participation does change by age. So on screen, you can show the proportion of each age group that says they're doing none of the above online arts and cultural experiences. And that rate of those doing none goes up by age. When we look at the proportion who are watching pre-recorded performances or events, you can see that it's relatively consistent. So just over half of each age group are consuming video content. Where that starts to change is when we look at watching live streamed performances. So on screen now, I'm just adding a layer in the yellow which shows the proportion of each age group which are consuming live stream performances, and you can see that it's 50% for under 35s, whereas when we get to, you know, over 55s and over 75s, it drops to 40%. Still a high proportion, I will add. In the red now, I'm adding the proportion who are doing an online class or tutorial, and this is an activity that's much higher in younger age groups, so 52% of under 35s versus only 22% of over 75s. So that content directed at self-learning and improvement, like videos, tutorials, masterclasses, is getting more traction in younger age groups. In the pale blue, what I'm adding now is actually a trend that goes in contrast to that, which is the proportion of each age group that are participating in virtual exhibitions and museum tours. And as you can see, this is actually higher in older age groups than it is in younger age groups. So whilst 15% of under 35s are engaging with museum tours and digital collections, that is much higher in older age groups. So 65s and over are actually have higher rates of participation in online museum experiences compared to younger age groups. And lastly, in the dark blue, creating content. So this is overwhelmingly a younger person's activity. 24% of under 35s are creating their own content to share online, compared with 4% of over 65. So it's interesting when we look at trends like this to think about why that is, and is there, if something's low in a particular age group, does that suggest there's an opportunity to grow that segment or to introduce a new behaviour, and what might the possibilities be of tapping into a new segment? However, it also gives us an understanding of who are the most likely audiences we're reaching through different types of experiences and content. And I think throughout this session, there's a number of indications that one size doesn't fit all. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So one of the big things that's happening online, which I think is really exciting for our sector, is that many people are discovering new artists and works online. And I'm showing the proportion of people in the dark blue. It's the proportion of people who they themselves have made a discovery online in the last fortnight. And in the pale blue, I'm showing the proportion who say they know someone who has. So they've heard through a friend or a family member that they have made an online discovery. And again, there's an interesting age trend here. So younger age groups are much more likely to say that they themselves have made a discovery. So 43% of under 35s. Versus over 75, 17% say they've made a discovery in the past fortnight. And I think, age aside, I think online discovery is a really exciting kind of prospect in terms of audience development for us to think about. And there's a range of examples we've heard about how that's happening and what the impacts of that are in terms of people's future participation and even potentially what they might actually pay for or buy online, or what they might do in the physical world when they can. But in terms of age, it certainly does suggest that, if young people are more likely to be discovering new works online, it suggests to me that older audiences may be more likely to stick with what they know online, and participate in the offerings of the organisations that they already know and enjoy. Whereas a younger person might be more likely to kind of go on that journey, end up deep in someone's Instagram history and be making those discoveries of things that they like. So in terms of our audience development, again, there's some interesting insights there in terms of who we're likely to be reaching with what. So in terms of motivations and barriers, there's a lot we've learnt from the Audience Outlook Monitor about what motivates people to go online and some of the challenges or barriers that they experience. So I'm showing now on screen a slide that shows the relative priority of different motivations. And the number one motivation for people to go online during this time has been to support an artist or organisation that they think is important. So we know from elsewhere in the survey that, quite a high proportion of people who attend regularly in the past and who have responded to this survey do feel committed to supporting arts and cultural organisations, and they're aware of kind of the plight, I guess, of the sector in terms of the financial impacts of the pandemic and what the restrictions have meant for the sector. And so over half of people who've responded to the surveys, it's 23,000 past attendees, say that they feel at least moderately, and then another 37% say that they feel strongly committed to supporting arts and cultural organisations. And this kind of flows through into a number of different areas and findings in the online data set. The second strongest motivation for engaging online has been for their own well-being. And so we've heard from people that, obviously the pandemic has been an extremely challenging time for many of us, and that the ability to kind of stay connected with arts and cultural organisations and experience arts online has been an enormous benefit in people's lives. Interestingly, the proportion that say they're motivated to go online for that reason is higher among those who are unemployed right now. It's higher amongst people who live with a disability. So there's some really interesting findings there in terms of who is going online for what reason. Another group that's more likely to say that they're going online for their own well-being is actually infrequent attendees. So whilst frequent attendees are more likely to say that, they're doing it to support, people who attend less often are more likely to be doing it for themselves, and to be going online to kind of take a break or escape the challenges of the pandemic and social isolation. So some of the other motivations, there's two around seeing things that people had wanted to see live, or seeing things that they wouldn't normally be able to see. And this whole idea about access does come through really strongly in terms of in different places in the data, but certainly one of the amazing opportunities that digital technology has provided is the ability to, see things from all over the world, and things that might not always come to our local area. So that's a strong motivation for some people. When we look at this list of motivations, it's really interesting to kind of think about, well, which among these are going to be propelling people in the later, in the coming months, even after the pandemic. And so, when we look at how strongly a motivator is to actually show your support, it's interesting to kind of question, how long is that going to last, and is that going to keep people coming back once things start to reopen? So I will just show you one quote here from an audience member who's talked about their experience. And this person said, "I would never have the financial means or the child-free time to attend most things. So being able to access things at a reduced cost or free at the moment is wonderful. Digital streaming also reaches a wider audience. I love that I can now see more shows, conferences, workshops, etc. Living in Perth, WA, we miss out on many opportunities. So there's a few different ideas in this quote, but one of the reasons I think it's interesting, and certainly one of the indications that we have from the quantitative data, is that Keir's already signalled that providing content for free, is an enormous challenge for our sector, and we've got to be thinking really hard about the business models that lie behind our online work and look at growing revenue streams and markets. However, I will say that there's indications in the Audience Outlook Monitor that the quantity and quality of content online and the ability for people to participate for free means that a broader proportion of audience members are participating in a broader range of things than they might otherwise be doing. And so there is a definite upside to providing content for free in terms of audience development. And I think it's something that we're going to be analysing more deeply in the data, is looking at exactly how, to what extent is digital technology expanding our audience beyond people that would come to our events in a physical sense. So we're going to talk a little bit about barriers now. So on the screen, I'm just showing the list of barriers that we measured. And number one barrier for people is I generally don't know what is on offer. So interestingly, there is a feeling amongst, a segment of our audience that there's lots out there and they just, they don't know either what's out there or what is best for them to be focusing on. So we've seen quite a kind of proliferation of online content, and the comments that some people have left us suggest that there's some people want help to prioritize and, things like top 5 experiences. So they're looking for things to be, I think it suggests there's a greater role for curation of online content and helping people through content marketing to discover things that they're going to enjoy. Another barrier that people's experience is simply time. So there's a big chunk of people who say that I have other priorities for my time. Not being interested in online or digital arts programs, a smaller proportion of people have said that's a barrier for them, although we have heard in the qualitative data that some people simply prefer the physical experience. I think that's a fairly widely held view, that digital experiences sometimes don't live up to or match a physical experience. However, for many people, the digital experiences that are out there are kind of good enough and have provided people with a range of ways to kind of experience the arts during this time. A small number of people say that they don't have the right technology or that internet speeds in their area aren't great, and that's more likely in regional areas. So I will also mention here that in terms of digital accessibility, our online offerings don't reach everyone, and that digital access is an issue that follows kind of socioeconomic trends in our communities. And so it's important when we're thinking about providing experiences online that we're acknowledging who they're reaching and who might not have access to those. So in terms of, just that idea about quality, I'm going to show a couple of comments now from audience members. So one person has said, watching online is not the same as watching live. The experience of a live show and the opportunity to go out. Me time is much more rewarding when not online. And some people have told us that they don't associate screen time with leisure time, or that they want to they don't want to be at their computer. I think there's also some comments that suggest that some people are thinking about online experiences as looking at their desktop computer or their phone kind of thing. Whereas if they knew how to perhaps project an experience onto their TV or watch through their smart TV, it might be received slightly differently. So I think there is an education piece for some segments around how to enjoy, what experience is designed for what use, situation, context, and how to enjoy something have a big screen experience that might be more immersive and a better quality experience if it's kind of a longer duration. Another comment is online content can't simply replicate what's done in person. It needs to rethink what it delivers. So this is an idea that Keir's brought up in his introduction. And certainly quality is something that there's a lot of different views about what a quality or a memorable arts experience is online. And one of the most interesting questions that we asked, qualitative questions, was what's the most memorable experience you've had online in the last fortnight, and what made it memorable? And I want to share some of I'd love to share a whole bunch of different quotes of what people shared, but I'd encourage you to go and have a look at the fact sheet, which we've released on Friday, and Bianca can pop a link to that perhaps in the chat now, where you can read a selection of comments that illuminate what goes into a memorable experience. So I'd love you to read some of those comments to hear from audience members verbatim. But for the sake of time, I'm going to summarise some of the themes. So when we ask people about what's memorable, these are the types of things that come up. And the two words that spring to mind for me are access and connection. They're the two really big themes, I think, to think about. And as Keir's alluded to, and that audience member alluded to, it's really trying to think about our online experiences. It's not replicating or reproducing something that we're doing physically, but how is it creating something that's different or complementary, or takes advantage of some of the tools that we have in the online world. So these are the themes: enabling something that people can't do physically, whether that's due to geographic access or other kinds of restrictions. Something that can be shared with friends and family. So many people have told us that what's been most memorable is actually sharing something with their children or their parents or their friends, and that the lower threshold for the family members to get involved has enabled some really special moments. Another one is making room for interpretation and discussion. So online contexts where they've been able to facilitate people to interpret a work or be in a forum where they can discuss it with others has really added to the experience and been really special for people. Connecting people from around the world. Many of us have had those moments where, it's felt incredibly special, particularly during a period of social isolation, to feel that sense of connection of a global audience all watching the same thing at the same time. Providing new levels of access in terms of, close-ups of an actor's face, or the ability to zoom in on a work or something like that, that goes above and beyond what someone might be able to experience from their seat or walking around a museum, for instance. And then the personal and intimate. So many people have said, seeing artists in their own homes, or, that kind of potentially voyeuristic kind of aspect to us all live streaming from our own homes has been quite special for people. All right. So in terms of online markets, in a moment, I'm going to jump into the dashboard and show you a little bit about what we've learned about online experiences in the different markets. But I want to just show you a couple of key statistics up on screen now about some of the indications around what people are paying for, and where might there be possibilities to grow the market for digital experiences. So as I've mentioned before, 2/3 of us engaging online more frequently plan to continue post-pandemic. 34% of audiences have recently paid for an online arts experience, and double that say they are somewhat or very likely to pay a small amount in future for online arts experiences. In terms of those who are paying or have recently paid, over a third have spent more than $50. And the most interestingly, there are some age trends here as well. So the age group that's most likely to have paid are the under 35s, but the age group that is most likely to have spent over $50 are actually the over 75s. So again, coming back to the idea of one size fits all, I think there's certainly a case for us to be thinking about targeting more specific, being really specific in who we're targeting with what online experience and what the ask is, and how that's structured or promoted to different groups. So interestingly, in terms of those who are, one of the things we can do in the dashboard, which will help in the moment, is to explore, what are the characteristics of people who are paying or spending more. And I think there's some really interesting insights that we can use to help us target our offers. So in terms of jumping into the dashboard, I'll just quickly show you my browser now. So many of you will be familiar with this already, but for those who aren't, this is freely available to you, and it's up. The link to access is on our website and on the Australia Council's website, and Bianca can post it in the chat. In terms of the reports that are available in the dashboard, key indicators just takes a sample of different results, but for this section, I'm going to just jump into online participation and show you some of the settings that you can apply. So I've just got all the regions of Australia ticked on, and I'm going to just show them all together rather than splitting them out by survey. I will also mention that there's a video with the dashboard tour if you want to learn more about using it yourself. But in terms of the filtering possibilities that are in the dashboard, you can filter by demographics of the audience member who responded. You can also filter by the characteristics of the organisation that they're affiliated with. There's also a whole lot of things around the audience members' past behaviour in terms of arts and culture, and some attitudinal things, whether they're a member or a subscriber, whether they're experiencing financial hardship, all kinds of things. So there's lots to play around with. What I'm just going to show you is actually frequency of past attendance. So you can, if you're in the museum or gallery sector or performing arts, you can tick on what's relevant to you. I'll show you performing arts for now. But as I've mentioned in the past, earlier in this session, people who engaged more frequently in the past with physical events have been shown to be consuming a broader range of online arts experiences. They're also more likely to be discovering new artists and works online. And in terms of whether they're doing that more frequently, as I explained earlier, yes, people who participated a couple of times a week are more likely to say that they're participating much more frequently or more frequently compared to those who participate a couple of times a year or less. However, those people who participate less often are more likely to say that they're going to continue post-pandemic. So there's some indications in here that mean I'm starting to think about digital technology more and more in terms of providing access. And for those who've joined our previous webinars, which go into all kinds of sentiments around re-attending physical experiences again for different sectors, what we know from that data is that there's some segments who are much more cautious than others right now and who expect to be staying home for longer. So people who experience an underlying health condition, or who live with a disability, or who have caring responsibilities. So there's a whole group of people who feel very cautious about re-attending and won't be around 10% of past attendees say they won't come back until the pandemic is over and there's no risk to them anymore. So unless we're able to kind of follow suit with New Zealand and eradicate the virus, we are going to be dealing with a situation where there's segments of our traditional audience that aren't coming back. And so I'm certainly thinking about digital technology and online experiences as a way to continue providing those people with access throughout the pandemic, and even beyond. There's some people who say that even after the pandemic ends, for various reasons, they won't be attending as much as before. And when we ask people, to what extent do you want online experiences to be provided alongside a physical experience, over a third of people say that they do want that option. And again, that's most likely in people who live in regional and remote Australia, people who live with a disability, people who have caring responsibilities. So certainly digital technology is going to be a really important tool for providing access to a range of different parts of the community in future. So I'm going to stop there. So we've got some time for questions, but I'll leave the dashboard open for now. I will just mention also our website, which has a range of different resources about re-attending events again. We've got fact sheets now for different states and territories. There's a whole lot of different downloads you can access and have a read of. There's also places where you can put forward an idea for the future of the study. You can also access a full list of the questions that were asked in the survey, and get in touch with us if you've got questions about applying those in your own work. But for now, Keir, are you happy to moderate some Q&A so we can hear what people want to know?
Yep, absolutely. Excited.
Great.
I've tried to answer a couple as we went, and I can answer one pretty quickly, which was about regional and metropolitan area. In the dashboard itself, you will have to log in. There is filters you can use to apply. Say you're interested in, maybe this is something you can show Tandi as we roll. Yeah. You can specifically look at organisations that are regional type and metropolitan type, and you can also kind of filter by audience behaviours against the thing that you're most interested in. So you don't have to do it versus online, for example, if you're really interested in people's, fear about planning for the future, and specifically as relates to organisations that are regional, you can do that using the tools. You can also then, if there's enough data, simplify to say New South Wales, for example. Do you want to say anything on that, Tandi, just about the kind of the broader types of filters that are geographic as well?
Yeah. So for instance, if you're based in regional New South Wales, you can click off the different states and just explore within New South Wales. And then there's two ways. You can either do a breakdown by region type, or you can explore within regional audiences, regional organisations only, and then apply different filters within that. So I'll just show you, for instance, in terms of online experiences, people who live in metropolitan areas are more likely to be participating in a range of different online experiences compared with regional. So yeah, lots to explore, but again, there's that dashboard tour for you.
Cool. There's another question about similar about slicing and dicing, but I'm not sure there's an answer, which is around the amount of money that organizations are spending. And I think that's a really interesting question. This is very much like the dashboard is about how audiences plan to be, or how they feel right now, or what they've done in the recent past. And so what we're trying to do in this session is then kind of compare that to some of the strategies and behaviors that we're seeing, from a kind of institutional perspective. We haven't added, or we can't, certainly through the audience monitor, you can't add a slice of like how wealthy are the institutions that you're visiting. But I think it's a really important point to kind of note as we've been talking about regional versus urban and metropolitan. And again, this is going to also answer another question. The institutions that are doing best are, understandably those ones who are resourced to do well. And so, if you can pivot 50 staff to do something versus you can ask one volunteer to do something, you're obviously going to have a much bigger impact and a much bigger differential. I think a big question for us as providers and as partners and as staff and as leaders is how do we not generate an even greater digital divide than already exists? At least in Australia, the digital divide has become much less about who can access, and it's more about who can participate. And so the vast majority of Australians have some form of internet access, but often it is a shared device that's an Android on a low data plan. So they quote unquote in the old divide sense, like have access, but they don't have the sort of access to participate in, say, that someone else who has NBN, a laptop that they've tethered to their computer, so that they're tethered to their TV, so they can stream like the on the full TV, the Sydney Film Festival, for example. So I think being able to participate actively, which we're seeing obviously in the tertiary sector, the primary sector, and the cultural sector, is different to being able to access at all. I think it's a big question for content providers, how you're providing low fidelity access and resources. Another question that came through was about audiences' feelings as related to brands paying for the generation of content so that they would then not be able to pay for it themselves. And I'm wondering, Tandi, if you have any insights or information about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, generally, I would say that audiences are likely to be more price sensitive than usual as a generalization. So we know that around 38% of past attendees say that they or someone in their household has already been, experienced a loss of household income from the pandemic, and others still fear that they may do in the coming months. So there's a sense of, and we talked in detail about this last week, that the market for the arts and culture is likely to be affected, and even with, say, museums reopening, although exhibitions are free, there are people still bear costs in terms of their visit, and certainly for paid exhibitions or paid offers, we are likely to see that the market is, I would say, severely affected in the short and medium term. And in fact, the financial impacts of the pandemic could hang around a lot longer than the health implications. So I'd say expect your audience to be more price sensitive than usual, and that even for those people who do come back to physical events, that their frequency of attendance may be affected. So having said that, I would say pursue every opportunity for sponsorship that you can, and don't worry about what audiences think about sponsors. I mean, obviously, if you're going to be approaching mining companies and your audience has certain political views, then you're going to have those challenges that we do otherwise. But I'd say certainly people are looking for free things to do at the moment, and they are going to sample a broader range of things that are free. So where you're able to provide that free experience as a way to attract people or give people a taste, I think that's a great thing to do, but always have in place some mechanism for people to donate, or have a paid offer that's linked with that free experience, so that for those who do have the means and interest, they can offer you financial support. So I think the fact that so many things have been made available for free and by donation has been a real plus for audience members. They really like being able to give as opposed to being charged. And people who give by donation spend more than people who pay for an experience. So we talked a bit about the age thing, but we know for those who spent over $50, they're more likely to have spent that by a donation versus paying for a pay-per-view or a streamed experience. Having said that, we are going to be keeping a close eye on how that changes in the next phase of data collection, which is coming up in a few weeks' time, because certainly the likelihood to dig into one's pocket to make a donation might not persist at that same level as the pandemic goes on, and as the financial kind of ramifications of a recession who knows what's going to happen there. So I'd say, donations are a great idea. Sponsorships are a great idea. Whatever you can do to make content available and keep that cost down for audiences is a great thing to be thinking about.
Cool. There's two questions that are kind of come up that are sort of can be grouped in a little way, and I think we're going to end up going over time. We've just hit 12, and so there's two things we want to do: is answer the couple of questions that have come through, and then a number of people have asked to see the survey results as well. So while I'm asking this question, or they're posing this sort of response, Lena, if you could put up the first of the poll results up on screen so we can see that. I'm not sure if we need to switch presenter to make that happen, Tandi. I know that they are, and we'll talk to that in a second. There's one question about, is there any data on audience members' ability to access the data as relates to, or data-based experiences, technology-based experiences as relates to the digital divide. My understanding is we're a little bit early in the process to really get good data around that, or get good insights around that. Probably there's some data, but not good insights. But the audience monitor is actually going to run again in July and again in September. So that gives us some more longitudinal and comparative things. And it also ties to the question that came just after that, which is, will this experience of the digital drive more advocacy for digital culture development support from government? And I think fundamental to the success of the provision of culture to Australians is the support of government. I think watching kind of museums and playhouses and theatres and galleries across the US, where there's sort of traditionally very low support from government and largely it's philanthropic and ticket-based, watching institution after institution close, many of whom have laid off hundreds of workers, losing a kind of generation, a young generation of kind of culture professionals who were hopefully going to be a more kind of diverse, nuanced and innovative voice, not happening in Australia because of that government support for our kind of cultural institutions writ large, is really exciting and like affirming, but also many people are being retrenched, projects have been cancelled, things are being put on shelves. And I think the big danger, if there isn't support for culture from government, is that we will return to, we'll bring cultural innovation back a generation or two to where the only things you can put on are things that are definitely going to make a really good return, that are really cheap to put on, that are not expensive and don't take a lot of time. And my great fear is we end up with a bunch of institutions putting on like old favorites, the old masters, like the dead white guys who already populate our content and our collections and our cultural output too much as it is, and we won't take bets and we won't take chances because the risk is too high, because the money isn't there, because we're in a recession and there isn't support from government. So not only is government support for culture fundamentally important and great bang for buck, given the $120 billion the cultural sector provides to the Australian economy, the danger of us not supporting it from a governmental level could lead to a kind of hollowing out of the most interesting, diverse and challenging kind of cultural content that this country can produce. So I think it's a great fear of mine that we do that. I don't know if you want to say anything to that, Tandi, before we go to the poll results.
Oh, no, just that I think we should be doing long-term thinking around planning for our digital investment. And so we've obviously seen things like quick response grants and stuff, which are great, but certainly thinking about, we need to be thinking 5 years into the future kind of thing, and what are those sources of bigger investment, and thinking about evergreen content rather than producing lots of little things. So I think we're going to see some, really exciting developments there in the future. So encourage everyone to be doing that long-term thinking, not just what can we make available now in the next couple of months.
Cool. All right, so we're going to go back to the two questions that we asked earlier, the polls, because a couple of people weren't able to see them for whatever reason with the technology, or they went past too fast and they wanted to revisit them. So the first one was, to what degree has your organization expanded its online content during COVID-19, during the pandemic? And what's interesting to me and sort of, I think, emblematic of this responsive change where we can resource staff, where we haven't had to furlough or lay so many people off, is that existing staff and resources have been expanded to produce online content. So we're kind of filling in gaps. But what's interesting, about just over a third of organizations have added more staff to it. So it's not just the existing staff, but they've added people who would otherwise be doing something totally unrelated to online provision. And interestingly, about 15% it says people have seen that they've just made no changes, sort of business as usual, BAU, which I'm surprised. I actually thought it would be even less than that. I thought it'd be only a few percent of people who saw no change, given the way it felt, certainly in the organizations that I work with, that it was sort of all bets were off. You needed to make a change, you needed to make it fast. I think the more nuanced answers are in the second poll question. So could you, Lena, bring that one up next? And thank you so much for people staying around. I realize we're past the hour, but only a couple of people have left. So clearly this is something that people want to kind of stay with for a minute. So the second question was, if you have expanded your online content, do you plan to continue this in the future, and for how long? So only 10% of people are saying, so 1 in 10 are saying, we don't plan to continue this level of content. We're like going to dip back as fast as we can, or perhaps we already have. Some, a small percentage, are like, well, we're just going to see out the rest of the financial year, let's say, and in July we'll go back to normal, or maybe even less. There's about 20% of respondents saying, like 2 or 3 months, which does lead us, I feel, to a place where there's something like normal visitation in Australia if we don't have a resurgence of the virus. I can see a lot of institutions kind of planning for something like normal. But the thing that's most exciting for me is the people who've answered the last 2 options, which is like foreseeable future, like until something changes, and if we could, we'd like to do it forever. So more than 50% of the people who've responded have said, this is a new normal that we want to make a fundamental change to our organization in the way that it provides content and to whom and the manner in which we do it. And I think that's a really big shift in that we're seeing from audiences like a percentile appetite for this change content to be able to continue to consume it. I know certainly I have some family members where I'm kind of broadly tech support and culture support for a whole bunch of family members, uncles, aunts, parents and the like. And the number of people I've helped get YouTube streams up on their TV so they can then watch, for example, Sydney Opera House, from our house to yours, they can, instead of watching on their phone, they can watch on their TV. Earlier in the week, I helped family members stream the Sydney Film Festival on their TV, because otherwise it was just on an iPad and it's like not a good film festival experience. But now they can turn the lights down and watch a full stream on their TV by show them kind of the order and the sequence of the buttons you need to press. So that for them is actually a better experience. One of my family members has a mobility issue that actually going to the theatre and sitting in the theatre in the cold in the theatre is problematic. They're kind of the problem they have flares up, and their ability to pay a premium for this experience, but then have it in their house, in their comfort, at their temperature, is something that they absolutely much prefer. So I'm curious. It's fantastic to see institutions saying, like, okay, we need to offer this because audience want to that. And I'm curious, coming back to you, Tandi, what these results, when you pair them with what people are saying about the future, how they marry or how they diverge.
Yeah, I think it's all about thinking about what makes most, and it's going to be different in every organisation, every context, but what makes most sense in terms of that mix. So for people who are looking at reopening their physical events, particularly in the museums and gallery space, there's some really tough resourcing decisions ahead, right now about planning for reopening versus continuing to invest online. So it's obviously a balance. But I consider, whilst the virus is in the community, at least on some level, a sizable segment of our audience is going to be excluded from the physical experience. And so I think it's absolutely essential in terms of access that we continue to look at on what we're providing online. And I think that there's indications within this data set that suggest there has been a behaviour change that to an extent is going to last in many different segments online. So I think we've all learnt new skills online, and we've gotten comfortable staying home to see things from our living rooms in new ways. And so I think there's a whole new era, and certainly it's very exciting from the point of view of digital innovation, what might be possible. I think, Keir, as you said in the rehearsal for this show, it's like the next 5 years has just suddenly come sort of rushing forward into the right now. So I can't wait to see what you're all working on and what you come up with. It's a really exciting time.
Yeah, it's both a kind of crisis and an opportunity, and the way that we kind of see it through is going to be fundamental for the next 10 to 15 years. So the next couple of years, they're unwritten in a way, and so we've got an opportunity to write them in a way that includes the most people, is done in the most innovative way, and is the most kind of progressive and positive approach that we can take to culture's role in Australian society. I've chosen to be excited. I'm excited. Chris.
Yeah, thanks. Well, it's been a fascinating session today. Thanks so much, Keir and Tandi. And I think the polls as well, just seeing those results come through from participants has added a lot. And it's interesting to see, especially that greater than 50% people are planning to continue in this space. So we can potentially, there was some comments in the chat that some people still couldn't see the polls, so we may be able to send the results of that out to participants. We'll investigate that so you can see what people were answering today. So yeah, thank you for the questions. We've got to most of them, but there are some there that we probably didn't get to. If you have those further questions or comments, please feel free to keep in touch with either us or Tandi at Patternmakers. We'll pop our email addresses up on the screen now, both the Patternmakers and the Australia Council email address. And we encourage you to share ideas, insights. Please play with the dashboard, explore the data, and get back to us. Also, what we'd like to do is just promote the next round of fact sheets and the different topics that will continue to roll out over the next few weeks. We'll be continuing to do webinars along with Tandi and other sector partners, and you can find those details on our website at the moment. Next week's session will have a focus on First Nations audiences, and that will take place on Monday again, Monday the 22nd of June at 11 AM, and you can register for that webinar now. And as discussed, Tandi's team will be checking back in with the further stages of the Audience Outlook Monitor in July and September. So yeah, not far now, around the corner for the next stage. So keep an eye on the Patternmakers website and the Australia Council website and social feeds for more info on that as well. Thanks for hanging around today, everyone. It's been a great discussion, and goodbye for now. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.